Hello everyone, it's Scott, and we're back with a first look at Tarkir Dragonstorm. On Friday at MagicCon Chicago, there was a preview panel that introduced the set to us, and I'm excited to talk about the cards from the set. But before we do, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Tarkir Dragonstorm, spoiler season, and beyond. And remember, if you're looking for cards from the set, you can visit us on the web at caffeinatedgamers.tcgplayerpro.com. So let's dive in to the previews. So our first one is Mox Jasper. So 0 mana, legendary artifact, and you can tap it for 1 mana of any color, and you can only activate it if you control a dragon. So it's an interesting requirement on it. And we've seen other Moxes that have had similar kind of limitations on them to, like, say, legendary creatures. But in a set that is going to be chock full of dragons, I think Mox Jasper is certainly a card that players will be looking for to put into dragon decks in Standard. And with the number of dragons I expect to see in the set, I would think that we're going to have some kind of dragon deck form, whether it's a tier 1 deck or not, I'm not sure. But certainly Mox Jasper will be a card that can help get that deck moving quickly. Alright, next we've got Chico, Paragon of the Way, for 2, a blue, a red, and a white mana. So we've got Jeskai colors. We get a legendary creature that's a spirit dragon and is a 4/5 with flying and vigilance. And when Chico enters the battlefield, exile target non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard, copy it, then you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So really nice ability on Chico. Basically, it's a 2-for-1. You pay 5 mana, and you get not only a 4/5 legendary spirit dragon, but you also get that copy of a card that you want out of your graveyard. So I think this is definitely something that is standard playable. Again, we've got our Mox, so that'll help get this out a little bit faster, because hopefully we'll be able to get some things out that'll help us get to Chico faster. And because of that, I think this is definitely going to be a card that is potentially playable in Standard. Next, we've got Stormscale Scion for 4 and 2 red mana. You get a dragon, that's a 4/4 with flying. And other dragons you control get +1/+1. And it also has Storm. And that means when you cast a spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. Copies become tokens. So what this is saying is, for every spell that you cast on the same turn that you cast Stormscale Scion, you're going to get a copy of Stormscale Scion. So I think it's going to be pretty easy to chain together some lower mana cost spells in front of this. And we're going to have a number of ways to reduce the cost of Stormscale Scion, like we talked about with the Mox Jasper as one of them. So I think getting to the Storm ability and getting multiple copies of Stormscale Scion isn't going to be a problem. And those cards will probably help put you over the top in a match, because you're getting 2 or 3 copies of this, which means that all of your other dragons are going to get those +1/+1 buffs and, make them very lethal in combat. Next, we've got Smile at Death for 3 and 2 white mana. You get an enchantment, and at the beginning of your upkeep, return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. So really powerful spell here. 5 mana is a lot for an enchantment, but this one in a deck where you've got a lot of 1 and 2 power creatures, I think is more than worth it in the mid to late game, where every single turn you're going to be bringing back from the graveyard things that have died in combat, and you'll get them back with that additional +1/+1 counter on them. So I think there definitely is a place for this in Standard, probably in some kind of, the Convoke deck or something of that nature will want this kind of card. Next, we've got Sarkhan, Dragon Ascendant. For 1 and a red mana, you get a human druid. That's a legendary creature and is a 2/2. And when Sarkhan enters the battlefield, you may bestow a dragon. If you do, create a treasure token. To bestow a dragon, choose a dragon you control or reveal a dragon card from your hand. So nice ability on Sarkhan there. So basically Sarkhan comes in really for 1 mana because you're going to be able to create that treasure token, I would think most of the time, because you're likely to have dragons in your hand or on the field by the time you cast Sarkhan. And whenever a dragon you control enters the battlefield, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Sarkhan, and until end of turn, Sarkhan becomes a dragon in addition to its other types and gains flying. So Sarkhan, I think, is going to be a very powerful 2-drop in Standard. Now, the question is the Dragon deck going to be strong enough? And I think that's the to be determined point from the set. But certainly, I think there will be definitely dragons from the set that are going to see play. And if they are, and we would assume that they're going to be in red, so Sarkhan will be a great addition to those decks. Now, in addition to that, we also have some other things already in Standard that help reduce the cost of dragon spells. So I wanted to talk about those for a second, just so we can kind of look at where dragons stand in Standard right now. So the first is Rivas the Claw. And Rivas, when you tap it, you get to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, and you can spend this mana only to cast dragon creature spells. So for 3 mana, you get a 2 mana dork for dragons. And a very powerful ability on Rivas is that ability, once during each of your turns, you may cast a dragon spell from your graveyard. When you cast a dragon spell from your graveyard, it gains when this creature dies, and it goes to exile instead. But I think that ability of Rivas to bring things back even from the graveyard, so you could be milling things in the graveyard, Rivas can then bring them into play later in the game when you want to recast them or cast them from the graveyard. So I think this is going to be a card that potentially would find a home in a Dragon's deck. Another card that I think is going to be important to the deck is Dragon Lord Servant. For 2 mana, you get a Goblin Shaman, and dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So again, another reduction in the cost of casting our dragon spells. And then we also have Sarkhan Soul Aflame. In this version of Sarkhan, dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And like we have seen with other Sarkhans, whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Sarkhan Soul of Flame become a copy of it until end of turn, except its name is Sarkhan Soul of Flame and is legendary in addition to its other types. So I think these 3 cards, I think at least 2 of them are going to be important to a dragon deck in Standard. And I'm not sure which 2, whether we're going to be in Jeskai colors or whether we're going to be in some Rakdos version of the deck. But I think these are going to be cards that are going to be important to making dragons work in Standard. Next, we've got Narset, Jeskai Waymaster. For a blue, a red, and a white mana, you get a legendary creature. That's a human monk. She's a 3/4. And at the beginning of your end step, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw cards equal to the number of spells you casted this turn. So very, very powerful Jeskai creature here with Narset. Basically, you can refill your hand turn after turn after turn. If you got things you can't cast, well, you can just dump them into your graveyard by discarding them, and then get them back, get other cards in their place if you've cast spells this turn. The card that I think this goes the best with is Monument to Endurance, where when you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. So you use the end step to discard anything you really don't want. You get the benefit of drawing a card, creating a treasure, or each opponent losing 3 lives. And when you got multiples of these in play, they can just go off and really benefit from Narset's ability here. So I think Narset is going to be a card that really helps Monument of Endurance find a solid home in Standard. Next, we've got Inevitable Defeat for 4 mana in Mardu colors. You get an instant, and this spell can't be countered. Okay, which is very important in Standard. And you get to exile target non-land permanent. Its controller loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life. So nice ability here on this instant where you get to exile something, plus you get the benefit of gaining life and your opponent losing life. So I think this has definite applications in Standard if we have a Mardu deck. Next, we've got Barren Step Siege. For 2, a white and a black mana, you get an enchantment, and as this enchantment enters the battlefield, you get to choose Abzan or Mardu. If you choose Abzan at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Or if you choose Mardu at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. So pretty powerful card here with flexibility on it based on, I think, really the board state at that given time. If your opponent's got a lot of creatures and you're going to lose creatures in combat, then choosing the Mardu side makes a lot of sense. But if you're the one who's kind of, dominating the battlefield right now, you can grow all your creatures, and that can have a significant impact on the overall game. So whether this is going to see play or not, I would say it's probably on the lesser side of seeing play, just because of the 4 cost to it. Next, we've got Skirmish Rhino for a white, a black, and a green mana. We get an Abzan Rhino. That's a 3/4 with trample. When this creature enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So again, this is a Siege Rhino, but a shrunken down version of Siege Rhino where your opponent's only losing 2 life and you only gain 2 life. But you get a 3/4 body and you get that ability on this. And I think that's going to make it playable, certainly in Standard, assuming that we do have an Abzan deck that forms. All right, those are our first look at Tarkir Dragonstorm. Tell me in the comments what you think so far of the set. I think this is going to be, one of the more exciting sets of the year because we're going to see a lot of dragons, and people tend to like dragons. So because of that, I'm expecting Tarkir Dragonstorm to have a significant impact on Standard. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Tarkir Dragonstorm spoiler season and beyond. Thanks. I'll see you next time.